an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Red Sister, Chapter 41 and Epilogue. In these chapters, we find out what actually happened to Nona, and it's a little bit scarier than I thought, and it makes more sense now that I think about it. Why she was afraid to tell people, because it made her look scary. Also, apparently, the black cure will permanently affect her. That sucks. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Huge thank you to Martin, first of all, for commissioning this episode and commissioning the entire book. Martin is in the chat. Hi, Martin, and thank you so much again. This was, it actually kind of worked out that I read a little bit into this first chapter, which I think I mentioned last time, that I accidentally read a portion of it before realizing that I had gone too far. And I think it was about 60 pages, really, this section, but because I had read into some of it, it cut it down a bit. This is a lot to get through talking about in an hour, so I just want to prepare you all that I may go a little bit quicker or brush over things that you want me to talk about, and I apologize. I'm going to try not to do that, but there are going to be things that I want to focus on and talk a little bit more about, and that has to come at the expense of some of the other stuff. So this chapter 41, the part that I had read already, is the part where Clera catches up with Nona. Clera is out of breath and just behaving weird. It's very clear that Nona has her eye on Clera, and when we look back, I'm really glad that Nona is smart enough to see the signs, because it seems pretty obvious to me as I'm reading it that Clera is up to no good here, but I wasn't really sure what Nona was going to be willing to consider. And later on, when she says, "I took it because I didn't trust my friend," it's a bit of a moment of shame for her that she has to admit she didn't trust somebody that she's supposed to be friends with. But it's, there's a difference between having faith in your friends and trusting them and willfully looking past red flags that are just popping up all over the place. So, Clera is, this is the part where she is telling Nona that she needs to drop her sword because it's too heavy, and Nona is looking at her and being like, "Oh, don't I need it?" And Clera is asking where Ara is, and Nona comments on how keen she is to find Ara. And I really wonder what Clera was thinking in these moments, because it seems pretty clear. Clera thinks she's cleverer than she is. Clera believes that by discovering that money is what moves the world, she thinks that she has unlocked some sort of secret of the universe that others don't understand, and because she has somehow gained insight into things that others don't have. And it's one of those things that, Nona grew up poor. It's not like Nona doesn't understand the importance of money or how it can rule things. But if you truly believe that's all it takes, then you're really going to lose sight of things. For example, Clera is continually talking about the fact that nothing else is really real. But the thing is, her affection for Nona is real. And if it weren't, they wouldn't lie to Clera and tell Clera that they don't even want Nona, that they're going to leave Nona alone. They can tell Clera wouldn't really play ball, apparently, if they went after her friend. So, or if she did, she would demand a lot more money. So they don't tell her. And like, that is they lie to her about her intentions or their intentions. And she believes them while trying to pretend that she really doesn't like care either way too much, or that she cares, but like nothing really bad is going to happen to her friends. Ara is the one that they say that they are after. And they sort of like, they tell Clera this story about how they're just going to take Arabella out of the equation for a little while and then let Ara come back to the convent, which I'm like, Clera, why would they do that? Like, the whole story that she claims to be so worldly and to like really understand things. But then this is so transparent, and it's just really like, it's almost sweet that she like doesn't see through this at all. I almost am like touched by it, but at the same time, you just want to slap and shake her, you know? Martin says typical teenager, right? Like, honestly, that's exactly it. Yeah, she's just a teenager who just thinks she gets it. And I remember as a kid thinking like how frustrating it was whenever adults were like, oh, you guys think you know everything. And to a point, as a teenager, I may not understand how the world works, but I felt I understood how the world should work, and that adults had lost touch with their idealism to the degree that they didn't even believe it was a possibility anymore, and so they did not strive for it. And that was how I saw it. Like, I was just like, yeah, you guys are laughing about how you know more than us, but really what you call knowing is just you being incredibly cynical and believing that the world is an like irreparable place, and I don't want to live like that. And as a grown-up, I am understanding, I still understand where I was coming from as a teenager, but as an adult, I'm like, oh, sweetie, but you had a very simplified idea of how to achieve those ideals, and you really thought that you knew what the source of that conflict was, and if you could just overcome that source, everything would be fine. And as a grown-up, I understand the complexity of a lot of issues, and that there is not really a solution. There's a variety of attempts and sort of endless battles to try to overcome some of these obstacles, but there's no solution, you know? And that is really the thing that, like, in a lot of ways, I didn't understand that we just have to fight against our own nature as a species a lot of the time in order to make the world better. And that is a really hard thing to do. And a lot of people aren't willing to do it. So anyway, back to the story. So Ara finally manages to catch up to them, and Nona gives her a big hug, and Ara is just like, what the fuck is your deal? And she says that Ara says we have to find Zoli next. She's Tarkac, Nona says we have to find Zoli next. And Ara is like, wait, but Tarkax is with her. He's watching her back. We really need to find the others who don't have anybody watching out for them. And Nona is like, Sister Apple, she isn't looking after you anymore. And we need Tarkax in case anyone makes a move on you. Also, the countryside is thick with Dernish raiders. And Ara is like, wait a minute, Sister Apple, she wasn't looking after me. What are you talking about? And Nona is like, girl, she was shadowing you. No, of course you didn't see her. That's like her job, is to not be seen. So they are continuing on, and Ara is like pressing Nona for information, and Nona is trying to give her as much information as she can without telling them about Zoli being the four blood, the fulfillment of the prophecy. And this is a weird, so there's a whole thing that I'll get into in a minute, but I want to read this part. Nona knew that Scherzel's intentions were not to be trusted. She had tried to abduct Ara, and she had put Isht into the convent to steal the ship heart. Had Zoli just been the price she was prepared to pay for the chance to steal it? So this is when Ara is like talking to Nona about the fact that Clera was out of breath, and that they don't really have a good reason for that. And Clera tries to say something about how she got lost and that she's from the city and that she isn't used to like running, never mind running like, on uneven terrain through the woods. They wind up staying in a pigsty overnight, and Clera has money to buy bread, and they're all sort of noticing the fact that she has this money. And then she makes another speech about money like ruling the world. Ara says something about how like that's a very shallow view of things, to which Clera rightfully is like, well, listen, you get to say that that's shallow because you've always had everything that you need. And that's not the way it is for most people, which I think is fair. And let's see, Ara managed to establish that several novices had passed through the village hours before them. The novices took turns watching throughout the night. Nona spent her hours staring at the darkness, wondering if Sister Kettle still lived and what horrors Sister Apple might have wrought upon her attackers, if not, which is honestly weirdly comforting to me. And it says she wondered too at the raiders she'd seen. They'd been young men, pale, with short, fair beards and eyes the blue of cornflowers. They looked too well fed, too well equipped to have come so far in order to terrorize peasants. So yeah, she's starting to like think about things and put things together a little bit here. So they are finally walking the next day. They go to this spot called Devil's Spine. And Clera is telling them that, like, this woman in the village told her the way to go. And I was very, like, suspicious of that when she said, oh, yeah, like, she gave me directions. I was like, or you have been instructed to lead them this way, and you're just trying to pretend it's somebody in the village who, sent you this way. So they are in the middle of, they're crossing what's called the Devil's Spine. And they are like, the weather is beginning to change, and it seems like there's going to be, just as there's a power in many clear voices ringing in harmonies, it lives too in the shadows of the clouds and in the light moving across landscapes, watched in still moments. I really liked that line a lot. So at this point, Nona gets distracted because there's like a pebble that bounces by her from behind, and she turns around and they see Tarkax like gesturing for them to come to the cave. And Clera is the only one that's like, we can't trust him. We need to move on. But, and Ara isn't like totally, she's not falling in one camp or the other. She seems willing to do whatever the two of them decide to do. But eventually Nona is just like, yeah, I'm going back. And Ara begins to follow Nona and is just like, well, what about Clera? So she's much more prepared to bow to Nona's judgment on this. And they go inside, and there are several other novices already in there. Jula and Ruli and Darla are there already, and Zoli. And Tarkax says there are soldiers waiting by the cut, perhaps a dozen. They're in ambush positions, so it's hard to tell. Guys, can you imagine being Clera and this fucking dude just coming out and just blowing your whole spot up? Like, and as of right now, he doesn't know she's in on it. And she can't share that he has blown her whole spot up. But this guy is just sitting here like, oh yeah, there's a bunch of dudes down there just waiting to ambush us. It's real weird. They're all soldiers. They're not Dernish. I just don't know what that. Clera is saying, well, it's soldiers. So what's wrong with that? The Emperor has dispatched them probably because the Dernish are out, and blah, blah, blah. Like, she just keeps arguing, and it's just, she is not subtle about this at all. She is not even a little bit subtle. It's sort of painful, honestly, how obvious she is being about all of this. So then finally the men approach the cave and yell out to them. And Ara is noticing already that there is something weird going on with Nona's eyes. And we wind up finding out later that Nona drank the black cure, and that did something to her eyes, which, based on the epilogue where much time has passed and her eyes continue to look like this, that doesn't go away. And I am really curious what the fuck that is about, because she says later that she doesn't feel any different. Like, it's not affecting her vision. She, as far as we can tell, there is no other effect on her other than the fact that she's like resistant to this poison. But I cannot tell if that's actually true. I mean, this long-term side effect of her eyes being black, is that something that we, and I don't mean we as readers, I mean we as like people in the convent, are they aware that this is a potential side effect of the black cure? Like, the fact that she decided to drink it at all is really quite bonkers of her. But, I mean, she was in a position where she kind of thought she was about to die either way, so she may as well. So, Tarkax at this point, when they're yelling, we want the girl, send her out and we'll go, Tarkax is like, I met two of y'all and I killed them, and if you want her, come and take her. And then comes back inside pretty confident that the fact that he told them that he killed two of them is going to distract them for a little while, because you can learn a lot about who your opponent is by looking at the bodies that person has left behind. What kind of weapon they used, how they were attacked, were they distracted, were they left alive and then they died, like, who knows. But he is hoping to just keep them out in the cold and out in the open for as long as possible. This moment, guys, was so confusing to me. You couldn't really kill 12, could you? Ara asked. The warrior puffed out his chest. I am Tarkax. He winced and started to turn. Ow! Ara's face creased with sudden pain, and she too started to turn. Nona was already spinning around when she felt the sharp jab on the side of her neck. As she turned, Nona saw Clera tangled with Zole, both of them twisting, punching, blocking with a speed that only a Hunska full-blood could hope to follow. They fell together, Clera beneath the Ice Tribe girl. And Tarkax, who would normally, like, intervene because this is Zole getting into a fight, is not doing anything. And Nona realizes all of a sudden that this is fucking happening. The thing that she has been worried about, it turns out, which we didn't, as much as we're inside Nona's mind, that doesn't, so this is something that is cited, I will say, by a lot of people as being like a plot hole. When you are inside a character's mind and yet a particular thought of theirs is kept hidden from you, the reader, it can sometimes feel as if that is like, it's not playing fair, right? So we are seeing things from Nona's point of view this entire time, but we find out later that Nona smelled something on Clera that indicated that Clera was brewing this body locking poison. And yet, despite being in Nona's head, we never hear that suspicion cross her mind. And I know that there are probably people who read this and are frustrated by this. This is, for one particular example that probably a lot of people have read, in Gone Girl, we are in the POV of the husband a lot, but the husband never actually thinks, I'm innocent or I'm guilty about this murder that he is being accused of. Despite us being in his head in the way that we are, we don't get insight into that, which just feels sort of like cheating. I have to admit, I don't care. This isn't something like I completely understand other people taking umbrage with that and being like, this feels like not really, like, if we're in his POV, then we should be in his POV. But I don't really mind writers taking liberties in this way. I don't mind that Nona had her suspicions for specific reasons and that I wasn't privy to them, because it just, the idea, like, we have been reading this entire book knowing that Nona lies about where she's from all the time, and we haven't been privy to the truth about that a lot of the time. So her hiding another thing from the reader feels in character. It feels like there is a precedent for that. So I'm just really not mad about it. And I wanted to address it because I could understand if other people found this frustrating, but I don't. It's fine. So there is this brief fight, and Nona is just sort of standing back and letting it happen because, as we know, this lockup didn't work on her. Now, Clera doesn't know this yet because she isn't aware that Nona took the cure. But she wants to watch everything play out because she is pretty sure that she knows what she knows. But she's going to let Clera sort of, dig her own grave here. So meanwhile, Tarkax is like going off to this leather wrap as much as he can because he's having a really hard time moving. And there are all these little tubes and bottles and things in there that are sealed with wax. And Nona realizes that he is trying to get some sort of antidote from this, but she doesn't know which one it is. And when she tries to ask him, he doesn't seem to have a good answer. Like, he doesn't seem to be able to talk to her about it. His mouth is, it's weird because like Zole is able to talk a little bit, but it seems like Clera gave the biggest dose of this lockup to Tarkax out of everybody, which makes sense because he was about to be the most dangerous fighter out of everybody. So Ara is like, Clera, why did you do this? And I'm like, bitch, why do you think? She has told you like 6 times exactly why the fuck she would do something like this. And again, it's money. And she gets another sort of, speech. And she says, it's Ara he wants, Nona. Thurin Taxis swore to the Emperor not to harm you. He'll take her, get his concessions from the Jotsis, and sell her back. All through third parties. She won't lose anything but a month or 2 and some family prospects. And that scarcely matters if she's to be a red sister. So you see, it's hardly anything. And then she whispers, I'll miss you, Nona. And she comes up and whispers it, thinking that Nona is locked up. But she ain't. So Nona decks Clera in the side of the head. And I really enjoyed this reveal because I was like, I have no doubt that Nona isn't affected by this poison, but I don't get why, and I don't know what she's planning to do. And then this reveal makes a ton of sense. So she's asking Tarkax, and there is blood leaking from him because, like, when he fell the way that he did, he hit a rock. So it seems like he is sort of dazed. And Nona explains to Ara about exactly what happened. And they tie up Clera. Zoli, of course, understandably, wants to kill Clera. And Nona is just like, no. She is still a friend. Like, yes, she betrayed me. And I'm very disappointed by that. But I'm not going to just kill her. Which, I honestly kind of admired. Like, there are a lot of times where a character refusing to kill another really dangerous character would be extremely frustrating to me and make me feel like, come on, you're just being an idiot. But in this case, I don't really feel like Clera is the threat. And that is not to say that she can't hurt people, but I feel like it's buying a limited reprieve. And there are times where dealing with a person coming back to make trouble is worth it to keep their blood off your hands. Sometimes that outweighs the other, and this just feels like one of those times when things go down later and it turns out to not be as far in the future as I thought it was going to be. Then I'm kind of like, oh, maybe you should have killed her. But I still don't really think so. So this is when Nona tells everybody that she took the black cure. Ruli is just like, what the fuck? And Nona is like, look, I knew that these idiots were here for me, no matter what the hell they told Clera. Ramil Taxis is just out there for revenge. And it says, someone out there knows that if they don't go back with me, they may as well not go back at all. Maybe all of them know that. And if they come, I'm going to go down fighting, not poisoned and helpless. And then there's this thing, what had made her tip it into her mouth? That had been the memory of Clera coming back off the plateau, having brewed the catweed liquor. She had blamed the stink on poor Malkin, because, despite the plant's name, Sister Apple's silly rhyme held truth. Catweed didn't smell like a catweed, but segrin root did. I am having trouble piecing this together. It says Nona, because, when they were trying to make this potion in the beginning, Nona goes into Sister Apple's stores and she takes more stuff than she knows she really needs for this cure specifically. She just takes a bunch of stuff that looks useful. She had stolen catweed and segrin root. After Clara's alchemy out on the plateau, some of both were missing. The segrin root cut to disguise the loss, but Nona had spotted it anyway because the smell had made her suspicious. And hating herself, she had checked up on Clera. Nona had come on the ranging knowing that Clera was carrying lockup. She just hadn't quite known why. So when she says out on the plateau, when was this? This is after they all got... Well, no, because she says she had come on the ranging carrying lockup. So when she says the plateau, when was that she was brewing this up? I'm trying to piece this all together. Because that has to be why her saying, oh, well, I got lost. That was when she was brewing it, right? Martin says brewing the lockup to poison Yisht. Right. Clera made some extra. Okay. So, and Nona had been aware. But when she says the smell had made her suspicious, if they had already been brewing lockup, why did the smell make her suspicious? Because this feels like it wasn't at the same time that she was making just a bunch of extra lockup in the same moment, or else that smell would have been expected on her. Does that make sense? So the way that this is worded makes it sound like Clera came back and took more ingredients and went and made a separate batch and lied to Nona about it. But the timing of it sounds to me like she took some of the extra ingredients when they were out on the ranging. She brewed it up, and that is what caused her to be behind and have to catch up to Nona. But then when she catches up to Nona, it's like Nona saying she had already come carrying the lockup, so I'm confused. Oh, Martin says there's 2 separate poisons. Oh, that's my problem. What's the other one, then? The one made from catweed they used on Yisht. Sorry, guys. Martin is helping me out here because I obviously missed something. But I appreciate you because I read this a couple times and I was just I feel like I'm missing how this worked. One from the catweed that was used on Isht. I thought that they used the lockup on Isht. The same thing. They used a different thing on Isht than Clera used on everybody else. Let's see. The other lockup used the Segin root. Okay. So I thought that it was all the same thing. Gotcha. Okay. So Nona is talking to Zoli and says, tell me what Scherzel wants. We're going to die here, so you may as well. The Toxis aren't going to want to leave witnesses. And Zoli says, Argatha. And Nona's like, I know she doesn't want that, but she gave you to the abbess. So why did she clearly doesn't care about that anymore? And she says, Argatha, not for blood. And she's like, yeah, it is. That's what the prophecy says. And she says, for hearts. And Nona is like, oh my fucking God. That's what it is. Not for bloods, for ship hearts. So that means that Isht is going to turn around and go right back to the school because she's not going to give up on getting it. Like, this is the whole fucking mission here. And this leads to a whole thing. I am going to jump ahead here. And this is obviously after Nona tells everybody her actual story. But she has this connection with Hessa, with the threads. And when Hessa is facing off against Isht again, Nona gets continually pulled into Hessa's mind and sees exactly how everything is unfolding. And it is really painful to watch because she is aware, even as she's feeling this like sort of sense of being indestructible and unbeatable, she like is distant enough from it to know that that is just the ship heart's effect on you, even though you are absolutely destructible and you're still as much of a human being as you ever were. It takes that feeling of vulnerability and like concern and self-preservation away from you. So she's growing more and more worried about this. Hessa is trying to track down Isht and is like, it's mentioned, I think Ruli says something about how Hessa has gotten further in learning about all of the threads than even the sisters like have gotten, that Hessa is just sort of a prodigy with this stuff. And Hessa is following the threads that Isht left down into the caverns. And as she's doing it, she's even able to tell where some of the other sisters have gone in and out. And then it begins to deepen and she's able to even like sort of reach back into like geological history and tell where these rocks came from and everything. It's really pretty wild. She comes across Sister Flint, whose neck is broken, which is horrible. And then she sees Isht digging and she realizes that Isht is able to affect the stone. That's part of why she was selected for this task, is because she can make it easier to dig for the ship heart. And as she gets closer to the ship heart, Isht's ability to fuck with the stone is only accentuated. So it gets to a point where she's basically like just digging through it like it's sand. Like it's almost no barrier. And she actually pulls the ship heart out. And it's like this tiny sun, essentially. And I was very excited to finally get to see this thing. Now, don't get me wrong. We haven't really seen it because it's emitting this light that I'm sure camouflages what it actually looks like. But Hessa is determined to keep her from leaving with it. And the threads that come off of Isht that Hessa has access to, one of them changes Isht's will like kind of, it's a mind control thing a little bit. And rather than just pull the thread that will kill Isht, Hessa chooses the non-violent route of trying to mind control her. I would argue, still violent. It's not physically violent, but it's almost worse. And that is kind of what Isht says when she confronts Hessa about it, is like, yeah, you just straight up violated me by going into my mind and doing that. I am normally not somebody that's cruel, but like that was fucked up and I am not going to let you get away with that. So it looks for a second like she's got the upper hand, but Isht turns around and drops a bunch of stones on Hessa. And throughout all of this, Nona is aware of it and is seeing what's happening through Nona's eyes. And it's clear Hessa isn't kind of like, there's no saving her. But what Nona decides to do is cut off her own shadow from her body and send the shadow through these threads to defend Hessa. Guys, this is bonkers. Bonkers. And, like, that shadow apparently doesn't come back. I don't know where it is by the time we get to the epilogue, but that shit gone. And between not having a shadow and her eyes never going back to normal, Nona sounds crazy. Like, this bitch must be super scary to see. So yeah, the whole, like, it is just a really, really amazing sequence of her cutting the shadow off and not being prepared for it to feel like she's cutting off a limb. Like, she's not ready for the pain. And it is acute. And then when she sends it through, her shadow just, like, rips Ish to shreds. Like, she fucks that bitch right up. Her shadow is effective. So that is just an amazing sequence. And I'm really bummed that Hess is gone, but, like, damn, was she kind of a badass, you know, despite everything. Let's see. Martin is saying in the chat here, Clera was making boneless, which uses catweed but doesn't smell like catweed, whereas lockup does. But Clera came back smelling like cat urine. Okay, it's the two poisons Apple used on Nona and Ara in the first shade class. Okay, got you. So I just wanted to jump ahead and deal with the Hessa thing, since it's mentioned here. But then I'm going to step back to talking about Nona and her own history. So Nona is thinking about, like, the fact that they lied to Clera, and she's wondering what Clera would have done. Would her price have gone up because of their friendship, or down because Nona had nobody to avenge her? She wondered how long Clera had been slipping into the Toxis pocket, what information she had first sold to turn that copper penny into a silver crown. That's the thing that I think hurts the most when you find out that somebody has betrayed you, is then having to wonder when it started and how long it's been happening and how many things that you, like, were just sort of like, oh, that's interesting, were actually red flags that you missed, or things that just seemed almost like, that's the worst part to me. Things that you look back and you thought were genuinely thoughtful or sweet, and now they are tainted because of something somebody did. It's the worst thing. So they yell, send out Nona Reeve, and all of a sudden, Clera, who had been pretending to be passed out, begins to wake up and struggle against her bonds. And Nona looks at her friend and realizes her friend would never have sold her. The Toxis had used Clera, tricked her, played on her resentment of Ara's wealth, which that feels very real. It's hilarious because they are wealthy as well, and they're using her, and she's just really thinks that, like, oh no, they're rich, but they're doing the right thing with it. They understand. Sweetie, the rich don't care about you. They don't, and they never will. So let's see. Oh, right. Okay. So she hands out, like, the weapons that they have to everybody. The knives to Jula, a throwing star to Ruli. And then Nona says, let me tell you a story. And Nona tells them, I lied about why my village gave me to the child taker. I lied and lied again, and now it's time to tell the truth. A juggler once came to my village. He was my first friend. It had been the truth that she told the second time of how Amondo had left and her mother blamed Nona for it, and Nona had believed her mother, even though the reasons were beyond her understanding. It had been the truth when she said that she had followed the juggler, taking directions from Mother Sibley out into the far fields. It had all been the truth up until the first trees of the Relum forest rose around the road. So then it kind of transitions into first person. And so she's saying, I followed. And I let the path lead me. Walked until it grew too dark to see. She winds up catching up to him, and he is like, what the fuck are you doing here? Hide. And he like tells her to keep her mouth shut. And she asks, why were they chasing you? Because there are these soldiers that he's like shielding them from. And he says, I owe them something. Why did you leave? I wore out my welcome on the first day, Nona. The real question is, why would anyone stay? Knowledge is a rug of a certain size, and the world is larger. It's not what remains uncovered at the edges that should worry you. Rather, what is swept underneath. Or swept beneath. Which is an interesting, like, yeah, I understand what he means there, I think. Which is basically like, knowledge, you can be told that you are being given information. But that information isn't necessarily the whole story, or it doesn't necessarily have all of its context. And so, yeah, you have information, but it's hiding something else that you do not even know to look for, which I think is pretty, that's an interesting way to put that. And he says, there's a line, a burning line that runs through the world, and it leads to you. And she asks, why? And he says, we're back to knowledge again. The important thing is that those men who were chasing me, one of them can follow that line. He calls it a thread. A clever man with clever fingers. He can tie 3 knots in an eyelash, that one, which if that isn't the most like evocative line. He'll keep following that thread, and he didn't want to go into the village to get you, so he sent me. And as he's saying this dude steps out, very tall guy, being like, oh shit, and you managed it, Armando, thank you so much. And they grab Armando up, and this like moment of Nona seeing him, he wasn't old, but he didn't look like us, not like a real person. He didn't look hungry. His beard came rolling down to the bottom of his neck, and there wasn't a spot of dirt in it. His cloak was scarlet even in the moonlight, and the silver bands across his shoulders shone bloody with it. I love this. He didn't look like a real person. He didn't look hungry. That's a line and a half right there. Guys, I had this experience, and I'm going to make this brief because there's still so much more to talk about. But when I was living in Guatemala for a few months, it was really, really, really startling to come across other rich Americans. Like, there were other Americans, but they usually had more money than me, or to come across wealthy Guatemalans, because I got used to seeing the faces of people who lived in real poverty, the kind of poverty that a lot of Americans do at this point, honestly, because these people are not able to get access to like dental care and health care. And so they are suffering from all kinds of, like disfigurements and illnesses and whatnot. And then you'll run across somebody who has the money for all of that and has like, you know, makeup on so their skin looks flawless and are dressed a certain way, and they look, it's really freaky after you get used to looking at real people, to see somebody that you had for a long time seen as the pinnacle of attractiveness, they suddenly don't look attractive anymore. They just look really fucking weird. And eventually, when you like return to seeing that kind of imagery all the time, you get sort of inundated with it to the point that it becomes normal again. And you no longer see how weird it is that people look far more perfect than they should. But at the time, I will never forget seeing people. There was a like SUV that stopped on this street, and these 2 people got out, and the woman had clearly like bleached her hair, and she was wearing this like fucking outfit. And the guy had this suit and his hair slicked back and like jewelry, and they just looked so fucking bizarre on this street of just ordinary people. They looked like they had come from another planet. So this description feels to me like this author has encountered that in some way, because it's just putting words to it that I feel like if you haven't actually experienced that feeling, it's not something I think you'd necessarily think of, you know? So I'm just really curious about the history behind that and where this author got this like description from. So anyway, so he then is just like, well, so we do have to keep you quiet, Amanda. I'm really, really sorry. I'm going to have to kill you. And as he says this, Nona is like being ripped up in the moment. She reaches behind and she just cuts the fucking neck of the dude behind her. And his blood shot out so fast that it drenched my shoulders, even though I was already moving as fast as I knew how to. I knew I had to reach the man with the beard without giving him the chance to show any of his cleverness. I slashed him across the stomach before he even noticed I was loose. So what follows is just this fucking fight. I cut him and the bright rings of mail. He noticed, folded up, hugging his belly. I cut that beard of his with another slash and left him torrenting blood from an open throat. And this is just basically what she does for the next minute or two is just guts everybody. Everybody. They don't even have a chance to get their fucking swords out of their sheaths. That's how fast she is. And Armando ran. Although he was my friend and I had saved him, he ran. Which, I mean, yeah, you would. Honestly, I feel for her for being resentful of him. Don't get me wrong. But, like, if you were Armando, you absolutely would fucking sprint away, right? Like, that is terrifying. Whether she's on your side or not, you also just don't want to be found amongst the bodies of a bunch of, like, dead nobility and soldiers, because that's not a good look. So even if it weren't out of fear of her, it's going to be out of not wanting to be associated with this fucking situation, you know? And she says, and that's how they found me the next morning, and that's why my mother let them give me away. And Darla is like, well, wait a second. How did you get these fucking knives? And Nona does a little demonstration. And then Ruli is like, the man was in scarlet and silver? Those are Scherzel's colors. The headman at your village would have known that. He would have known that they couldn't keep you, not with the emperor's own sister after you, and your mother would have understood too. The child taker was your best chance. A girl with a price on her head sold for nothing in a cage for sale. That was all they could do to keep you safe. And Nona's like, nope, that's not, they would have told me. And Ruli's like, wouldn't they? Because if they don't tell you, then chances are you don't try and come back. And I love this, that like Nona has to take the time to process this. At this point, she's still in denial, but she continues to like think it over and is like, is that what happened? And it has been such a frequent source of rage for her that when it's time for her to access that rage again, the doubt sort of ruins it and it makes it inaccessible to her. So she has to find another means of getting in touch with it. And she manages to do it by using the rage from Hessa's death, which it's just really like obvious. Nona has a hard time standing up for herself. It's much easier for her to stand up for other people, which maybe is supposed to be tied in with her being a shield. But I think the thing is supposed to be that maybe she's not a shield after all. So I don't know. Is she supposed to be the actual like Agatha? Or are we meant to like, because Scherzel's now after these ship hearts. So was she after Nona and then went after the ship hearts when she realized like, oh, I guess I'm just not going to get the Agatha, so I'll do this other thing. So anyway, there's like this moment of, she saw herself a child of 9, the dried blood of 6 royal soldiers still in her hair. She saw the child taker, Grey Stephen, her mother weeping. She had stared at the memory so long, so many times. Could it be possible to see it another way? I just love that, you know, like that is just growing up can be that way, where you just have this like fixed movie in your mind that you have just seen it and interpreted it the same way for years and years. And then all of a sudden a bit of context throws everything off and you're like, oh my God. So we have the scene with Hessa and the two of them going up against one another, and Nona comes back to herself and she is using the rage from that to get in touch with the path. And when she goes out there, this fight is just bananas. Part of what Nona is afraid of is pushing everyone away because of the fact that she is like enjoys the kill. She is into it in a way that she knows is not normal and not healthy and not okay, and that maybe will make people not want to be friends with her. And rather than fight it the way that she always has, when she steps out there, she decides that she is going to embrace that. So she steps out. Guys, I was born for killing. The gods made me to ruin. That is a fucking line and a half. She batted aside an arrow and snatched another from the air before it reached Jula's neck. She tucked it into her belt. Nona launched herself into motion, driving up and forward, aimed at the bright entrance where tall figures crowded like the shadows of teeth in the cave's open mouth. And they try and come at her, and Nona basically, it's like everybody else is on pause. It's like she gets to just run around the room and cut throats and break arms and do whatever she needs to do while the other people in the room are barely even moving. And then she can just sort of step back and watch it all fall apart because it happens so quickly that their bodies aren't even responding to their own death as quickly as she deals it out. So like in the epilogue, there's a moment where she is like standing there and the bodies behind her all finally collapsed, but she has gotten out in front of them and sort of posed in front of them before they even crumple. I mean, damn. So I have to deal with the epilogue, so I'm going to jump through this, but this fight scene is just so great. I love it so much. And then she's like out of gas. And here comes Taxis. And he is enormous. I think it's mentioned that he's like 12 feet tall. I do not know how that's possible in this world, but there it is. And he has these fucking demons in him. And she still has this like, this symbol that Ish had on her to like disperse spells and energy. And he can't die as long as these fucking things that are inside him are possessing him. And she starts to realize that. So she presses this symbol to his face and then stabs him up through the chin into the top of his head. And it finally kills him. The thing's like, you know, he basically explodes inside of his armor. And it is pretty intense. Like this whole showdown. I really, really enjoyed this. And the way that he says, because she's like, why don't you die? And he says, I can't, they won't let me. I can't help but interpret it as almost like he wouldn't mind dying. Like he kind of wants to, but these things won't allow him to rest. And I'm not sure if that's actually how he meant it, but that's sort of part of the way I felt it was delivered, that line, you know? So then, epilogue. It is important when killing a nun to ensure that you bring an army of sufficient bravery. For when Sister Cage of the Sweet Mercy Convent steps onto the battlefield, courage is often found to be in short supply. Well, yes, it would be. Years ago, before some of these girls were brought wet and screaming into the world, a different set of novices had watched Sister Cage first arrive at Sweet Mercy. There is little of that child to be seen in Sister Cage. She stands shadowless in the torch-ringed courtyard, and in one moment the novices know that the stories are true. She glances their way, each eye utterly black, as if that missing shadow had been poured into both until it filled her skull. Woo! She is deadly pale, strange in her beauty, her hair jet and jagged, cut close. Her habit is faded, stained, trailing ragged tails of cloth, but it is still red, and she runs, and as she runs, she looks like death descended from some high place. So we are getting poured right back into the battle from the opening pages. And it turns out that it is Clera that went after Ara, a.k.a. Sister Thorn. It seems as if our Ara is going to survive, though, which I was relieved to hear, honestly. I love this, guys. The sword that Nona's carrying, it's described as a long blade, thin, carrying a slight curve, its edge cruel enough to cut silence and make it scream. Woo, I love that line. It's so good. So she is just destroying the folks around her. And a bunch of the mercenaries turn around and watch the bodies of the ones she just fought fall to pieces, quite literally. And a bunch of them just fucking turn and run. Just run. They're just like, no, I don't think so. Which I cannot help but laugh at. Like, that makes sense to me. That seems like the thing to do, you know? The Palarthi left the scores of their dead still scattered or heaped where Sister Thorn had killed them. They ran, pursued by a terror they couldn't name, something larger than the sister who stood behind them, but perhaps as small as the disappointment in her eyes when they turned to flee, which I think is just really something. She's just like, aw, come on, guys, I just wanted to kill a few of you. Like, come on, you can't just let me. Clera is like, how the fuck are you here? You weren't supposed to be here. So Clera is still out here fucking shit up for money, which, girl, when are you going to learn? Come on. And Clera tells her, like, I kind of blame you for letting me go in the first place. You should have let them drown me. You are still acting like a child and don't understand how people work. People lie and cheat and let you down and sell you out. And Nona says, doesn't mean I have to be like that. And I love this. Like, Clera is simultaneously arguing about being this way as self-protection, but also obviously ashamed of it. You know, she can't like make eye contact. She's like flinching, you know. I just love this. Ara could live if we get her to Sister Rose. And Clera says, let them take her. I don't care. I didn't come for Ara. She was just in the way. And Nona replies with, I missed you, Clera. And I was like, girl, I love you so much, but like, what are you doing, Nona? Girl, what are you doing? And Clera tries to be like, well, you know, we're not friends anymore. Kids don't stay friends with people forever. It's fine. Again, to me, protesting, like she's like trying to be like, well, I didn't miss you, but she doesn't say I didn't miss you. It's like she's trying to justify the fact that they aren't friends anymore, even though she kind of wishes they were too. You know, there's like, she regrets this, it feels like, but also seems to think she's gone so far she can't turn back. And Clera says that she wanted Ara to run and that she should have run. And Nona asks where Lanotaxis is. And Clera is just like, he's just out there waiting for you to spend your power on these other people so that they can come in and finish you off. And Nona says that the power isn't spent. You think you can kill me without reaching for the path, little Nona? Clera drew her sword, a twin to Nona's, taken from the body of a red sister. Nona turned away, her back to Clera, looking out across the plateau. I think I won't need to kill you, Nona said. I think you'll fight them with me, sister. And that's the end. And it's very honestly optimistic, sweet ending. And I fucking hope Nona is right. And I hope that Clara will like let her be right, because this actually is reminding me a lot of the end of the first and third Young Wizards books, High Wizardry and So You Want to Be a Wizard. There is just a real feeling of like, the darkness is not an enemy. It is a friend that still wants to be your friend, but has so much self-loathing and like regret and rage about it that it resists that desire. And you need to continually extend your hand and continually make them think that they have the opportunity to do better no matter what they've done before. And it's really like profound, honestly, and difficult. Like, I'm not good with that, you know? Martin says, so what do you think actually leads to those events? And do you think Kettle is alive or dead? I'm going to say Kettle is alive. As far as what leads to those events, I don't know, because like Clara says something about how Nona got cast out of the Abbey. And I don't know what that's like. Did she help Clara escape and like have to take punishment for that? But Nona's still here. And she's not supposed to be. So she clearly has some kind of tie where she knows if the Abbey is going to need her and is in trouble, she's around, but she's like not supposed to be part of things. And she's wearing an old habit that's all shredded. So she's like living rough, it seems like. I don't know. Yeah, guys, this is quite an ending. I really, really liked this. This has been a lot of fun to read. It's very different, you know. Very, very different. But thank you very much, Martin, for this. I'm out of time here, so I better wrap. But yeah, thank you very much, Martin, for commissioning this. I believe that you have started commissioning the following book, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't know what the title of that book is, hopefully, because I really do want to know what the hell comes next. And Martin says, yup. Yay, Mystic Sister. Ooh, that's a fun name. So yeah, guys, stay tuned for the next one. I'm excited, and I'll see y'all again soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.